finance regulation dynamics in the EU post-COVID-19 and the way forward after the epidemic. He is a PhD student at Tilburg University in the Netherlands and in-house counsel at the LL Group, and thus has a vast academic and professional experience. I'm also very happy to welcome Ms. Jürschick, who is from our university in Münster. She will give us insight into the transformation to sustainability and if it's a challenge for German environmental law. She's a PhD student at the University of Münster, belongs to the scientific staff of Professor Dr. Schlacke for the German Federal Advisory Council on Global Change. With years of academic experience in researching environmental law at the European and the German level. I would also like to welcome all spectators who joined us tonight and expect you to actively participate in our question and answer session after the discussion. We are really looking forward to hearing your presentations, Mr. Vizzotto and Ms. Jürschick, and getting a deeper insight into the topic. That being said, let me give you a brief overview of today's topic. The environmental policies in Europe are shaped mainly by the European Green Deal. This deal outlines ambitious goals for Europe, including achieving a carbon neutral and sustainable economy by 2050, while also respecting the fact that nobody should be left behind. To achieve this goal, there are a series of policy packages and initiatives. For example, there is an action plan to restore biodiversity and to cut pollution. By investing in environmentally friendly technologies, supporting the industrial innovation, or working with international partners to improve global environmental standards and much more. Alongside that, the EU plans to spend 100 billion euro until 2027 to financially support the ones who are most affected by the change towards the green economy. In Germany, the government enacted the Climate Action Law, which is a major framework climate law. It also created the Climate Action Program 2030, which is a program for policies that contains, within others, the expansion of renewable energy and support for e-mobility. So you can see that there are lots of goals of the EU and the member states, including Germany. It will be very interesting to see the developments in the next few years. Nevertheless, the current COVID-19 crisis has a strong impact on ongoing processes in Europe. Aside from many economic sectors like the tourism sector or the restaurant industry, the negative impact of the crisis demanded a very wide financial and structural support at EU and at the German level. Therefore, the question arises if our health crisis has influenced the European Green Deal and its goals. On the one hand, people traveled less than in the last few years, and the lockdowns had some direct short-term but also positive impacts on our environment, since there were less emissions and the air quality has improved. On the other hand, the use of single-use plastic increased, which has negative consequences. These are just a few of many examples and the reason why we are very excited to hear more from all speakers. I'm sure that our guests, Mr. Vizzotto and Ms. Jürschick, will give us valuable insight into the current situation and future developments. First, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Vizzotto. Enjoy the discussion.
Thank you very much, Annika. It's a great honor to participate of the meeting tonight. And I'm always very excited to discuss the topic of sustainability. So thanks for the invitation, Annika and Douglas, and I hope we'll have a great discussion tonight. Very excited. Should we start with the presentation? Yeah. So I already updated. Should I share the screen or maybe some technical difficulties on my side? You're on mute, Douglas.
I apologize. When you click on the presentation item, you may just you will see all the data, the data online, and you may choose your presentation. Then it should be the first item you find.
Yeah, I think it's.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
There you go. There you go.
Here we are. Entschuldigung for this one, but okay. This is a topic that's a dear topic to myself, sustainability. I have been writing about sustainability at least since 2008, 2009, when I did a LL.M in law and economics on the framework of the EMLE, the European Master in Law and Economics. At that time, I wrote a thesis about the green share, so the conflict of interest which exists between the fund manager, right, and the green investor. Already at that time, I have identified some bottlenecks or some difficulties in order to increase the flow of money in sustainable type of products. In 2013, I wrote another master at this time about international trade and environmental restrictions to commerce. I analyzed at that time a directive at the European level about the sustainability criteria in order to Europe to accept biofuels. And last but not least, I have started as external candidate, PhD, in order to foresee what is the optimal mix or what is the proper way to try to give an incentive to the players of a given market in order to surpass or indeed go further the so-called green economy. My answer, which will be elaborated during the presentation, is the following. There is no bullet or a one-size-fits-all type of solution for the issue of sustainability. The COVID crisis actually even showed even more that it's not only the environmental but also the social aspect, especially quality of life, right? And also the governance aspect. So with that in mind, I'm eager to have a fruitful discussion with all of you, and especially with my colleague Ulrich. Yes. So a little bit of showing where do I work. I have also a private duty. So I work at DLL. It's a leasing company. So it basically finance equipment. It's a fully owned subsidiary of Rabobank, which probably you know, and we are active in many countries. So more than 30 countries. We have it's very diverse institution, 40 nationalities. We have the possibility of having 2 paid work days to engage with our communities, considerable portfolio, and fully owned by Rabobank. One of our main objectives, and this is indeed in connection with the current green or especially the circular economy, it's not only leasing the equipment itself, but also the solution, so the services, also taking account the whole asset life of an equipment. So once the contract is finalized, we will either refurbish, do some maintenance, and resell. This goes in line with some of the objectives of the sustainable finance regulations, which will come in a second. I always like to explain, or at least make us aware of how important and how huge is the potential of the nature in comparison to our a little pale blue dot. Those 3 squares that you can see here, so that's the Sahara Desert. So those red squares are in 6 hours, the world's deserts, they receive more energy from the sun than humans consume in a year. So every of those squares, if they received sun for 6 hours, they would be able to feed the whole world, this big one, for a whole year. So there is a huge potential in order to use nature. And the role of technology, which I'll mention later on, is also very important. An author tried to quantify monetary terms. What is the amount that the ecological system, so that the nature itself does to our benefit? The amount was 33 trillions per year. Further to this, we are in times of ongoing changes on the temperature of the world. This causes damages, and then damages are, there is some data here, for example, for the European Union Commission. Only 2017, the disasters caused by weather, so floods, hurricanes, and so on, they caused almost 300 billion of damage. Also land degradation, which is basically using or reusing the same land for the same type of culture. And last but not least, there is that's only one of the regulations, and that is something that I will go on with in more detail later on. There is a real maze at the European level in terms of legislation, which, you know, can be divided in directives and regulations. And further to this, you have also the German legislation that Ms. Ulrike will later on explain. So how to navigate on this type of maze. And the maze was even enhanced by the impacts of the COVID crisis. So, we were already on a situation which needed action, and the COVID was like, there is a saying, which it's very interesting, and it has to do with our, it's a saying by a French author who says that when we look to a blue sky, we cannot imagine, but since the beginning of mankind, we have facing wars and pandemics. And sooner or later, that pandemic was going to happen. In reality, 2002, 2003, when you had the first SARS pandemic that was more, it was located in Asia, they said that we were one mutation away of a pandemic, and then it happens. The pandemic showed to us a lot of situations and created, and is creating, as you all know, a lot of impacts. So the property market is at risk. The conditions or the fundamentals of many companies really went down, meaning that also the cost of funds, basically, a concrete example, we are a bank fully owned by Rabobank, and normally we are funded by Rabobank, but we can also be funded by, for example, the European Investment Bank. As the quality of the credit of the customers that ask for credit has been gone down, we have to increase our coverage in case of a default. Of course, other exposures, like for example, households, there is a lot of unemployment. There is the whole of automation now. And also there's other concrete aspects that the use of the digitalization of economy can create a lot of situations which make people, households, small, medium enterprises lag behind. That's one of the reasons why in September 2020, the European Commission increased the timelines, the objectives of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So it was 40% and now it's 55% by 2030, compared to 90 levels. So the final objective is the so-called climate neutrality by 2050, European Green Deal. And the new target is based on comprehensive impact assessment on the social, economic, and environmental impacts. So we are going to reach this further on in the presentation, but there is a movement towards getting away a voluntary type of disclosure to a more of a mandatory, applicable for some players in the financial industry, which I will come to later on. And a situation that even with the recovery fund that has been issued, there is still a huge gap to be filled. So how to try to solve this? How to find investments which are eligible under the Green New Deal? So we need not only public funds, but also private funds, right? And how to get the private funds with the objectives of the legislation which we are going to analyze on this presentation, which are amongst them bringing uniformity to the market, bringing clarity to the market, reducing the asymmetric information of the market, trying to come up with benchmarks, trying to come up with more clear governance structures, and so on. But then, and this is a question, so myself and Douglas as well, we are from Brazil, so the situation with sustainability, it should obey, and it took a long time in order to realize that we are in front of a essentially contested term. So depending to who you ask, sustainability can be, there is general agreement in what sustainability is, but it's no general agreement on which part, let's say, of the triple bottom line, right? We should tackle first. So depending of where you are, depending of which type of government structure you have, there will be different perspectives and different approaches. Focusing on Europe, I would like to depict first what are the players, what are the stakeholders of the whole sustainability and financial sector. You have the international part, right? So international organizations, United Nations, OCDE, World Trade Organization, Basel, and then you have on European level, the public actors and the regulators, European Commission, you have the European Banking Authority, and their counterparts on the insurance and pension. You also have self-regulation bodies, and that's one of the reasons. I mean, very specific markets in a very dynamic world, they need interaction between all players, also the private actors, and then the shareholders and the stakeholders of the whole civil society, which does include think tanks, universities, civil associations, and so far and so on. I know this slide is not for our audience because we know, or at least we have studied a lot about, right? Laws, regulations, directives, technical notes, but I must admit that on the sustainability field, we are really seeing things which are burdensome, which it's thousands of pages on how to classify an asset as green and how it collaborates and so far and so on. That's why, that's just a recap as well. Most of you are aware of it. The global agenda setters, again, that whole story on the interaction of multiple stakeholders, which ended up, and I think I think which is important is really to make that differentiation between soft law and hard law, but there is also something in between, right? Especially on the financial sector. Let's go now. And this is where the role of European Commission starts. So in principle, so the role of the European Commission and also of the European Banking Authority is not only proposing new laws and policies, but also action plans, opinion papers, guidelines, which can try to reach the so-called, I call it the keywords or mantra words, which is regulatory convergence, legal harmonization, so far and so on. And in 2018, and that's where I want to start the more straightforward legal talk, is that in 2018 there was a Commission action plan on financing a sustainable growth. Sorry for the typo. So it had three main objectives, and here they are: reorienting capital flows towards sustainable investments. That's one. Trying to bring as a mainstream sustainability into risk management, and last but not least, foster transparency and long-termism, right? And then you have so you have three objectives and then actions, right? So one of them is number one here, trying to establish a sustainability taxonomy, which are going to go later on to talk about it. Standards and labels, trying to incorporate sustainability in prudential requirements, which is my perception that this is the real incentive. We are all talking here about incentives, right? How to make the financial market participants to adopt on their internal framework the proper assessment of climate risk and environmental risks. One more, and here it's where it starts. So the list, right? So you have a lot of documents which interacts between themselves. So you have the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, which basically establishes transparency requirements. So if I am an investment agent, I should, and I market that I have green products on my portfolio, I should disclose some elements in order to show this, right? Second to it, you have also the European Union taxonomy, which can, especially for our business at DLL, it can give us a line or a more information about if I'm going to finance a green asset, this may cause, I can charge less interest because it's safer, right? But you know, these are all regulations which have been just issued. I have a timeline below which shows this. We have others, directives. I'm not going to go to them now very deep, because this can stay for a second moment. This is for the. There is also a point, a very important point. So besides, and then I hope Ulrich can elaborate later on, because for example, the directive and the regulations, they are at the European level. As you all know, the regulation has immediate effect. The directive can be further enhanced and defined at a local level, but they will also have the local legislation. So I would call a type of, if you consider like an onion, so it's different layers of obligations. So that's a timeline, right? So you have, and this is a whole discussion which I face, I face internally with my internal stakeholders, is how to explain to them and how to convince them that how to implement controls. Well, when it's a regulation, it's not about convincing, but the problem is that the regulations are written in such a manner which gives a lot of doubts. It's not clear-cut type of writing. And that's why, for example, so you have the European Union taxonomy. So the European Union taxonomy, it establishes some criteria which you assess in order to see how a specific activity collaborate towards the transition, towards the mitigation of climate change, and if that and it's like 6 objectives: how it collaborates to the climate transition, how it collaborates from a circular economy perspective, how it collaborates in terms of water and sea resources. And these definitions of the 6, so we have objectives 1 and 2 here, then we have all other objectives here. They are very extensive type of sub-legislation. So we can talk about the different types of legislation on a later moment, but for now, what I can say is that you have the so-called first regulation and directive. Then you also have the delegated acts, right? And such delegated regulations, you see here, taxonomy delegated acts. So they are issued by the European Bank Authority, right? Which incorporates the same power that the Council and the Parliament they have. And it's as you can see, it's a long path in terms of slowly. A lot of different legislations are enhancing more green type of disclosures, classifications, and so on. But we have not reached what I would say, which is one of the most important incentives to do it so. I would qualify as 2 big incentives. I like to use the example of GDPR, right? When you have a leakage of data, when there is a breach and no action is taken upon, the processor or the owner of the data is going to be, it's going to receive a fine, right? There is a clear-cut number. Of course, depending on the level of the breach, and if you have collaborated towards, either if you're a controller or processor, there will be a clear-cut penalty and consequence. So maybe you should include these in the legislations that are ongoing. Second one would be really prudential requirements, right? You have the capital requirements directive and the regulation. So for specific, there is an attempt to come up with some green, to come up with a green factor, meaning that if your portfolio has a specific percentage or of greenness in line with the European Union taxonomy, you may be required to have less capital on your books. So that's the capital requirement. And then, of course, if you have less capital, this it gives a great incentive to invest on this type of assets and financial products. But this is still not clear. This is still on the go.
May I also at this point?
Of course.
Yeah.
Feel free.
Maybe Mr. Jürschick can give us insight on that as well. There's a whole bunch of cost of compliances in these rules, right? Cost of transactions and what about the amount of investments in new technologies? I mean, the state burdens many companies to comply with rules, and these companies don't necessarily invest in new technologies that would be more that would come to the result in a faster manner. Is it like that?
So that's a very well posed question, and actually the slide in front of us shows right, because it will really depend, and this is a discussion that we have also on a daily basis, very much indeed. So before GDPR, I'm not saying that data was never important, but you know, we are like an author, Susanna. I don't remind her surname, but probably she will be on the next sets of slides, something down below, on a type of surveillance capitalism, right? So until we realize that, and without clarity about fines, there wasn't internally a proper data management type of structure. That was the final incentive. It became mainstream. Nowadays, with the sustainable regulations, I believe firmly that we are one step behind, meaning that sooner or later there may be some really material consequences, and that is why I put this slide in front of all of you, which is when you have when you are a bank, right? So of course, this will depend of the size of the customer, of the exposures that you have, all these elements of the reputation, or on how you market yourself to the public. So, for example, Rabobank really markets as a leader, right, on this type of disclosure. So, but again, the point is that there is a lot of interaction between the regulators and the banks, right? And it's like, and this is something that I also raise a lot internally. It has been a long it has been long time ago that compliance, legal, and risk departments were a type of one-stop type of shop. We have to have interactive interactions with all our internal stakeholders, because next month will be a new regulation, in 3-4 months another one, and so forth and so on. For example, going to the next slide, there is but that was that clear, Douglas, or?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, perfect. So and then you can see, you know, it's, for example, this is a study that has been processed by European Central Bank, which is another one of the members of the whole European financial system. So they concluded that in general, the institutions do not yet have properly established their risk profile in order to access climate-related environmental risks. So that's indeed exactly, you can see here. So no one, it's very low. So metrics and targets, do they use metrics and targets of environmental metrics or climate-related metrics in order to engage on credit risk analysis? No, or very low. So there is a lot of things to do still, but we are on the good path, and that is why I want to. There are even, I mean, the prudential is something that we can discuss later on, because this is really burdensome to explain now. But what I wanted to say, and that is the point. I see, and this is that's the underlying rationale of my whole thesis. We are in front of two mega trends which are going to overlap sooner or later. Actually, they are on the as we speak. Why? Because in the last 2 years, 90% of the world's data has been created. So the numbers are beyond my, not that I'm good in mathematics, but it's I mean, these numbers, 2.5 quintillion bytes of data are produced by humans every day. So there are more data than there are liters in the ocean. So it's huge, right? It's huge. And now with Internet of Things, so it's a lot of automation going to happen. And this is something that sometimes we are not aware. Automation is not only the automated warehouse of Amazon with the automated forklifts and so on. We also have automated, so to say, reg tech. So let's say DLL has a number, let's say has 10,000 types of assets on their portfolio. They are able to finance across all business units 10,000 different types of assets, from a Lenovo computer to a tractor. And how do we qualify these assets according to European Union taxonomy? This is burdensome. Humans cannot do this as fast as we would like to, right? They can do, but much probably with the help of some automation software. Our credit applications, we have a credit score which automates credit decisions depending on the variables, right? And this much probably will also help happens with green assets. So that's why you should have, and this is also something that I keep on saying, we must have a sustainable data committee, because unsustainable data leads to unsustainable economy. And then also have the issue with biased algorithms, which maybe we can talk later. Well, here is just also to give a glimpse. I talk about services, right? Before, it's not only equipment that the bank finances. So we have the installation, insurance, maintenance, upgrades, end of life, so circular economy, so recycling the asset, advisory, so fleet management. So believe it or not, there are companies, huge companies, which sometimes don't have a very good system to manage their fleet, their forklift fleet, and this causes losses or non-optimal type of use of the assets. I like to always present these 3 books, which I think if you haven't read them, just do this just after this event. I think these are very, very important books. So that's Shoshana Zuboff, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, Weapons of Mass Destruction, which is what I have just told about the use of algorithms. So, and then 1984 about civil liberties. So the data that we are managing, so how to rely on data which is trustworthy, quick to access, and in compliance with legislation. How to do this? So how to light up the difficult path, this maze, this labyrinth. And that is my final slide. So connecting the dots. I think that as legal professionals, one of the most important roles that we have nowadays, it's really to try to put in perspective all risks, but also trying to light up the path for other professionals, because we have the possibility. We as legal counsels, professors, students, we have been taught and we know how to tell a story. A lot of other people, they have a more task-oriented skills. We can really try to have a holistic, and this is really where I think we should explore more. So my impression, my preliminary conclusion now is that in order to really go towards a green economy, we should focus on corporate governance, right? The decision takers, the executive board. And then basically, here are the sustainability, right? All the aspects which I have talked before. You have the digital aspect of it, which I also talked before. We have the processes to try to reach the green economy. So a new product development, try to bring a little bit more of democracy, so minor shareholders participation, which we have examples, we can talk later on. Cross-pollination, so triple helix, which is interaction between university, civil society, and the private and the industry. The transition that we're working on with these tools, but last but not least, always have in mind the dangers of which I call the Pandora box, which is how to avoid greenwash, how to avoid a green bubble, how to avoid green protectionism, how to avoid biased artificial intelligence, we can also talk about later on, and last but not least, how to avoid locking in poor countries for excessive legal requirements. I would say that's my initial exposition. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation, and I think you named many interesting topics, and yeah, like the green taxonomy or something like that, or many ideas like that. And I think you gave a great overview of the influence of the financial market on sustainability. Yes, great. Ms. Jürschick, before you start your presentation, would you like to comment on the presentation of Mr. Vizzotto?
Thank you. I thought we could also do this later in the discussion, but thank you, Vincius, for this great
welcome. Thank you.
In the financial in the finance sector. I'm not really an expert in this, so it was very interesting, and I learned a lot. And I think what is very important indeed is the fact that we have to bring together the digital transformation and the sustainability transformation. So maybe that's a point we could discuss later, how this two transformation strings that are often seen departed now have to be brought together so that we have a co-evolution. And I think you said, Vinicius, sorry,
no problem.
that we will remark this in a few years, that they belong together. But I think it's not something we will remark in a few years. It's something we can change, we can shape as humans, because digitization, these are processes that are made by humans, so we can interact with these humans, we can regulate, we can shape digitization ourselves. So I think there's a great potential to bring digitization into the service of sustainability, but also we have to shape digitization so that it doesn't become a barrier for sustainability. Yeah, I will leave it to that. And I have a lot of questions also for the later discussion, such as what can the finance sector do for sustainability transitions, and is it really a burden for the finance sector, or is it a chance to redevelop itself? Yeah, maybe that's what we can discuss later.
Yeah. Great question. Thank you, Ulrike. I agree. First of all, I fully agree with you. I mean, there is a doctoral thesis from a professor from Oxford. Well, I fully agree with you that we need to regulate AI because AI is biased because we are biased, right? So we can discuss this later on. And I see the financial sector as an opportunity, full opportunity to reap the benefit because, and that is my point, with the use of sustainable data, we will be able to foresee things which we're not able to see before. I mean, if we start to talk about algorithms, it's incredible what they can do if properly indeed managed and regulated. But thank you for your questions.
So should I start my presentation? Yeah, I will try.
Please.
This could take a moment. The technical transition.
Now it's probably easier, right? Yes. There you go.
Yeah, it works. Okay, let's go. Yeah, hello again to everybody from my side, and thank you for the organization team for inviting me to talk about sustainability in Europe during the pandemic. Yeah, and I will bring a more general perspective on the topic of sustainability, not such a specialized one as on the finance sector. And I want to start by saying sustainability is not a topic that lies in front of us after we solve the COVID crisis. It's rather a topic that we have to care about now, but that has already been clear. Okay. So I want to talk to you about the necessity of transformation to sustainability in Germany and its implications for German law from a very general perspective and from a global perspective also partly, because sustainability is not a topic that Germany can solve itself. It's like a global challenge. And I will firstly introduce the concept of sustainability transformation and give you some scientific remarks on the necessity and challenges that it brings to our societies. And my second part regards the law and what sustainability transformations mean for our discipline. And in the third part, I will give a little outlook of what, from my perspective, does the COVID-19 pandemic to the sustainability transformation process that we are in or not in. Yeah. Okay. So let's start with the concept of sustainability. Today is the UN Day of Mother Earth, and sustainability, though, is not all about ecological questions. It's an overarching concept that have been described as a concept to organize societies in a way that meet the needs of the present generations without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is the definition of the so-called Brundtland Commission from 1987, but it's still valid today. What you see on this slide are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which show the broadness of the concept. So you have the fight against poverty and hunger on the world, a goal for health, for education, which is more about social and economic development. And then you have the claim for clean water and sanitation, for climate action, for life below water and life on land, that are more the environmental parts of the sustainable transformation. And what we need to make this transformation happen is strong partnerships for the goals and peace, justice, and strong institutions. So we have an agenda worldwide where I think about 198 states of the world subscribed the Sustainable Development Goals, though they are not legally binding, but at least we have a commitment on the political side that there is a need for a sustainable transformation towards these goals that we see here in this slide. So we see sustainability as a concept that integrates economic and environmental and social goals from a global and intertemporal perspective. And though the ecological dimensions, I want to emphasize them because they are on a great threat today and they need special focus. We have a broad scientific consensus on the necessity of a sustainability transformation for the reasons of environmental degradation. Nowadays, everybody talks about climate change, but it's not all about that. It's also about our biodiversity that is really shrinking, land degradation and the pollution of water, soil and air. These are all part of the problem we need an integrated solution for. The if we need solutions is not a scientific question, not even the what to do. There are many propositions on the table for many, many years, such as carbon pricing for the climate change mitigation, the establishment of conservation zones to protect biodiversity, methods for sustainable land use to avoid degradation. So these, the challenges we have today are more on the implementation level. How do we bring the knowledge about the solutions into practice? How do we organize societal acceptance and participation for sustainability transformations and overcome the barriers? And I want to show you with the following slide the complexity of sustainability transformations. To really have a society-wide change, we need great changes on many places of the system, on many So we have like the individuals, the mini me, mini you, that where we need change agents. Then we have they can go together into and build a niche where they empower themselves. But also we have to have changes on the regime side. So we already saw technologies and the finances, the market structures, and the laws, which is for us very important as lawyers. And if we have changes on many places, then we may also, many of this meso and micro regimes, we can have changes on the world use visions and paradigms that will affect also the changes of the macro regime. So we have, you see, this is a very complex process we are in. The amount of goals that we want to succeed show us also that we have to integrate solutions. So it's not enough if we have one solution that gives one measure that only favors climate change, for example. It is said that my internet connection isn't very well. Do you hear me? Yeah.
Everything's fine. Everything is fine.
We need integrative solutions that favor multiple sustainability goals at once. And science is looking for these solutions that bring co-benefits. I brought you the example of forests to show you what that could mean. So if you look on sustainable forest management only from a perspective of climate change mitigation, you would say, let's plant as many trees as possible that grow very fast and bind as much carbon as possible, so we can have a great climate change mitigation. But it's not that simple, because we don't have only the challenge of climate change mitigation. We also have to adapt the forests to the consequences of climate change. So we need not only the fastest growing trees, we also need resilient trees in our woods that bind as much carbon as possible. And forests are also a great hotspots for biodiversity. So there is no sense in just building like woods of always the same trees one by one, and there's no biodiversity. So if we integrate all the solutions, we would have, as you see here in the pictures, we would have the existing forests that we have to protect, like in the Amazonas or something. There's a lot of carbon binded in these ecosystems, and we have to really protect them. Then if we restore woods and forests, then let's do it very natural, so that there's not only the benefits for climate change mitigation, but also for the biodiversity. On the same time, we can bring forests into our agriculture, for example, in agroforestry. Or we could use forests also for our economy if we foster building in timber, which you see on the right side of the screen. Yeah. And if I want to add also the social goals, like we have woods that do really good to our personal recreation. So there's also a great impact of using woods as recreational spaces and making them and retaining them for these purposes, if you want to integrate the social component. Okay, now let's dig into the law. Sustainability in German law exists in a broader and a narrower sense. While my remarks on the German law focus on the environmental necessities of sustainability transformation, so this concerns sustainability in a more narrow sense than we have seen. Though, as Vinicius already said, we always need to integrate the social side and also the economic side in environmental solutions. But does this focus to the environment in my speech lead me only to environmental law? I spoil it does not. And I want to show you with two examples that you already see here on the slide how law is tackling and is tackled by sustainability transformation, and how law has to break with traditions lawmakers and institutions have formed over time. First, the concept of sufficiency, which is not originally a topic of law and not of German law. In my PhD thesis, I analyzed sufficiency as a new and transformational concept for law. And sufficiency means the restriction and change of human activities to reduce environmental impacts of human behavior, even if that implies lifestyle changes and other forms of production. So it's about consuming less, or consuming few, or consuming the right size, or consider limitations for production, for example, for goods that we don't need, or distribute the resources that we have along a limitation of overall. So sufficiency is a concept that is attributed to strong sustainability and deep transformation. And it's not really up to date, or it's up to date along me, but it's not really the mainstream concept of sustainability transformation law today. That mostly is about energy and resource efficiency, the improvement of circularity in product and waste management, and the energy transition to renewable energies. Sufficiency instead is more about concrete behaviors, such as riding a bike, a bicycle, not a car, buy and eat seasonal and regional food, and eating food with few shares in meat or other animal products, or the limitation of certain resource-intensive behaviors, for example, tempo limits on highways or reducing flights. Changes in behavior and lifestyles, such as the sufficiency concept proposes, are not only reflected in environmental law, as for the conception of infrastructures that promote sufficient behavior, such as, for example, car-free cities and bicycle lanes. It's the planning and construction law that decides how these projects come into place. how sustainable people act depend a lot on the infrastructure and settings they have around them. The change of human activities does also have impacts on private law. For example, the consumer law has originally built only to protect the consumer from misuse or and not to empower them for environmental friendly use of goods and services. This is already changing now. For example, in contract law or in consumer law for buying goods in the European Union and also in Germany, we have an extension of warranty periods and liability for products to establish more durable products. If we do not look on the consumer but on the supply side and consider sufficiency-oriented products and services, then it's all about economic and profit law that we look at. It could be about competition law, what advertising is environmental friendly, which size of enterprises do we want to have, or do we want to reduce sizes of certain enterprises in certain branches? Which eco-design standards can we implement to favor doable and right-sized products that doesn't evolve even bigger? And what is the legal environment for innovations that follow ecological and social goals in a primary business model? This is also about how to change economic success criteria through legal instruments and goods and services. In the sufficiency concept, goods and services are not only provided in the commercial sphere, but also in the civic or private sphere. So you may heard about food sharing, all these sharing concepts that doesn't have to be always business models, but also work in the civil society. And there are also legal questions raising about this this form of organizing the production of goods and services outside the economic market. At this point of my research, I can share this insights in what the questions are. I don't have already all the answers, so but a quintessence of my research is that environmental law may be a starting point for sustainability transitions, but it's not the end point. And if we want to have a sustainability transformation, we really need to transform a lot of fields of law and change ways of thinking in many fields. As a concrete example, I want to present some insights on the German climate change law, where we saw progresses in the last year. The German climate change law has been established in December 2019 and is seen as a huge progress because it is establishing binding climate goals for Germany as a whole for the first time. We didn't have that before. It seems to be surprising, but it is like that. And for the first time, it establishes climate protection as a legal obligation for federal public authorities. And it's not only the Ministry of the Environment and the Ministry of Economics and Energy that are now explicitly responsible, but there are sectoral goals that cover different responsibilities. That means that the German climate law has a distributive approach in which sectors, the ministry that covers a sector gets reduction targets of greenhouse gas emissions, and if these yearly designated budgets are exceeded, an immediate action program has to be prepared. The really new thing here is that climate change mitigation is made to an original task for each ministry, and it's binding. And it's not something that the Ministry of the Environment needs to push depending on the goodwill of other ministries. Let's have a look on the numbers on the success of the German climate law, which also has been affected from the COVID-19 pandemic. As we see here, it's last week we got these numbers, so this slide is in German. I can translate it to you in a few minutes. Under the German climate law, an expert commission has been established that should evaluate the progresses made in climate change mitigation. And we see here that the targets that the climate change law gave to the sectors, so we have for the energy sector and energy industry, we have this line here, and we see, oh yeah, we made great progress here. I will explain to you. Yeah. And then we have the industry sector, and we see also the target was achieved. And we see the building sector, and we see the target has not been achieved. So everybody now is really curious about the action program that will be released in. I think it has to be released in 3 months from now. Then we see the mobility sector, and we see, okay, the right columns are about, the actual reductions that has been achieved, and the gray ones are the trends that we would have had if there hadn't been the COVID-19 crisis. So we see that in the transport sector could only achieve the goal because there has been the pandemic that reduced mobility really a lot. But we see also that in many fields, in many sectors, the climate targets of the climate change law has been achieved, and we could now say, oh yeah, that's a success, we achieved the goals. But we have to look at how ambitious has been the goals, and these goals has been established before the European Green Deal, and the following ambition-raising process has been established. So they are not that ambitious how they should have been if you ask scientists, especially climate scientists, they would say, oh yeah, the ambition has to rise. Yeah. And I want to explain the numbers that are here on the left. You see that 8.7% were the reductions of emissions that have been achieved. But the expert commissions also made very clear that this huge success only was possible because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and that the reduction had only be minor 3%. So we has, for one thing, we can thank the pandemic. It's a cut in emission we had. Yeah, and this was already brings me already to my last part, which is about the COVID-19 and sustainability transitions, and what is it good, is it bad, what does it make to it? Yeah, here we see some good and some bad points, and I will change to a global perspective now. The first negative point is the coronavirus puts a brake on some progresses in the international conferences on sustainability, especially for the year 2020. Two very important conferences has been announced, from the Convention on Biodiversity, and this is the CBD, and the United Nations Framework for Climate Change. Now I changed the. Yeah, both of the conferences had been postponed to 2021. So the negotiations just were postponed, and everything takes more time. And that makes national progress even more important. But it's not. It's also that the pandemic puts a brake on the national progresses, because we have a situation where the public discourse is overfilled with discussion on COVID-19, and all the capacities of the public discourse room is taken for COVID-19. So if you remember 2018, 2019, we saw a big society movement with the Fridays for Future movement, and everybody talked about climate change. And then came COVID-19, and how many information did you get on the sustainability transitions? So that they really we would need a huge public discourse to consider pathways that we want to follow to make the sustainability transformation happen, and it didn't. And there's not the capacity. But maybe there are also some good news, and it would be interesting to hear Vinicius' thoughts on that. The recovery programs, they now take a huge amount of money into the hands, and this money could be spent on sustainability goals. So if we shape the recovery programs in the right way and recover forward and not backwards, then maybe we have a chance to give a lot of money into the sustainability transition. But it's also the other way around. If we spend money now, we cannot spend it in 10 years, or maybe not. So we need to take the right decisions now. A hopeful path is often seen in the digitization, especially the virtualization, and we heard of this before. COVID-19 brought a lot of changes in behavior that actually saved emissions in 2020, and there are hopes that some of this behavior changes, especially what concerns the virtual meetings or hybrid meetings that can save business traveling, that some of it will still be there after the COVID-19 pandemics, especially in businesses. Yeah. As last point, I want to make you remember that the COVID crisis can be seen as one of the first big crises a lot of us really feel by ourselves that an unsustainable world brings to us. So the number of crises that constant environmental degradation, climate change will bring to us will increase over the years, and people may now realize that the COVID crisis that is attributed directly to environmental degradation is the first one, and it's on us to act now. Yeah, that's my last words. Thank you for your attention. If you want to learn more about sustainability transformations, I can recommend the publications of the WBGU I'm working for with my chef. And yeah, we recently published a flagship report on sustainable land management and how to organize sustainable land use. And in the 2019, actually, we published also a flagship report about digitization and sustainability. So how to think these transformation processes together. So you can find this on the website and order information there. Thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much for your for insights, and I will not take much of Mr. Vizzotto's time because I've seen he has been keeping notes during your whole presentation, so he's probably ready to jump into that.
Ulrike, thank you very much for your presentation, and I have a lot of things to say. So, and because I think that our presentations then they complete each other, they interact very well. And you pointed out, I mean, I'm delighted to hear about the sufficiency concept, right? Because the sufficiency concept, and then I will, this is not in this presentation. Can I share the screen with another slide which I have here? Because I think there are some authors which will really be very interesting to your thesis.
Share for sure, yes. You mean your screen?
Let me see. Yeah, I will share.
It's the fourth item, yes.
Oh,
yeah.
Can you see?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's too small, or it's small to me. Can you see?
We can
it's
see,
big.
yeah.
You can see full. Okay, so
not
this
full
is
screen, but anyway, it's okay.
But can you read?
Yeah.
What is there? Okay, so the concept of sufficiency, which indeed, because about the change, okay, let's, we have the American way of life, right? So in the 60s, or the 50s, there is a professor, which I really, I saw a presentation of her in Stanford 10 years ago, and just recently I remember of the name of this dear professor. Her name is Carlota Perez. She's from Venezuela, and I think she's based in Europe. She wrote about exactly this, so about green growth, about the European way of life, meaning how a change on our habits can indeed lead us towards a more sustainable life, and as a result, a sustainable economy. Another important book, I think it's important to read about the role, because I also saw about the role of narrative economics, which is how stories go viral, or how to, and that is the necessity of having to interact with more people besides people of only one domain. I think these are very, very interesting. And the first one is an article, Is Smart Green Growth the Solution? Lessons from History. That's from Carlota Perez. So basically, she establishes that every age, every 60 years, we face a new type of revolution, right? So, so there was the first industrial revolution in Britain, then the second, the age of the steam, the electricity, age of oil, then the age of data on the transistor. So we can talk about this one later on, but I would like to somehow connect with your thesis. This may be some good insights. Okay, land sharing. How do I do the end sharing here? Okay. Third to that, I noticed some interesting topics besides this one. One is about the sustainable use of land, right? Which is a very interesting concept, which actually there is, this is really happening, which is basically how to integrate the forest with the culture with monocultures, right? Either sugarcane and also animals around. So that's a concept which has been also happening in Brazil. There is it's a farm. It's called Toca Organic. It's from a former Formula One. It's a very famous family in Brazil. It's Diniz family. It has the same surname as I am, but I'm not from that the wealthy part of the family. But they really have this concept of integrating, and they're exporting this also to Africa, because with Rabo, I have been to Africa, and then we have been in Kenya. They are really doing this type of attempt to use the land on a more sustainable way. Going to the topic of how to, and I noticed that you asked me on the beginning, at the end of my presentation, how to use the financial system, or what is the potential for the financial system to participate of this whole journey towards a green economy. Actually, there is a lot of aspects, concrete aspects, which I can use to clarify, and what I also use internally, because we must be aware, and I really appreciate that slide that you showed about the mini-me, right? It's me, myself, and my perceptions, interactions with different groups. And there is even this book, I think it's Connected, which shows how, because when you want to reach a change, you should get in touch with people away from your bubble, right? People that you see 1 or 2 times per year, then it can really boost a more robust, so to say, change. But when we go to the topic of the financial system, there are some concrete examples which show that, for example, sustainable buildings, so lenders, owners of houses, of sustainable houses and of sustainable real estate, they have a lower probability to default than people that finance standard houses, right? So this is data which is already, which shows that, and why, I have been trying to investigate why, and also to convince why, because, you know, it's not, it's a very slow, because the problem, why don't we have, and I have this question, why don't we have a full transition now for the green way of life, the green economy? The problem is, and that is why, Jürschick, just like you have said about the merge between the digital and the sustainable, the problem is that until now, we don't have a proper history, a track history of credit scoring about all types of assets. That is, for example, why I will not disclose the name, but there is a company which sells energy transition services. So this basically means that they go to a random supermarket or a shop and they say, if I can provide you some consulting services, which will and also which will reduce your energy bill in X% or in 200, 300, 400 euros. And imagine, for a big shop or supermarket, this can be thousands of euros per year. And the problem is that banks are very traditional because they really want to have grip on the asset that they are financing. But on this case is a little bit more difficult because this has to do with wiring the property, installing new type of energy saving refrigerators, if you will. So when a credit analyst starts to analyze this type of situation, they ask the legal department, if there is a default, can you really take away that equipment? And then the whole discussion starts. But for me, it's much more a discussion about, I mean, if that customer is using an energy saving type of solution, this means that this shop, this company will have much more liquidity because they are saving cash and they can use this to invest in other things. But this is still an ongoing discussion, so there is some resistance on this type of situation. Another one would be, again, also reality. The European Investment Bank, which until some months ago I didn't know, they call themselves the Climate Bank. So they are going to offer cheap funding, cheap interest rate for customers which finance green assets. And then have the interaction with that European Union taxonomy legislation. So yeah, it's your presentation gave me a lot of insights on how to connect this, indeed, this sufficiency concept. I think, and again, only data will be able, really meaningful data will be able to make this transition. I have other examples to tell. For example, when you mentioned the situation related to companies which are too big, or companies that sell themselves as sustainable, but the deep down supply chain, right? They explore people. We can see this on the food chain, on the supply chain, chocolate, right? So how to, so to say, punish these companies? The deployment of big data and the deployment of digital solutions can really make, well, we have this case, which is really not that long ago, that hedge fund which beat against its own company that they had shares on it to try to reap a benefit. And then on Reddit, there was this group of investors which counterattacked and caused the hedge fund to lose a lot of money. So I'm an optimistic person. So for example, we have the example of Santander, Bank Santander, which is a very, they have a lot of shareholders, also small shareholders. And 2 years ago, they were able to implement a full full electronic capabilities of it's not Bitcoin, it's what is the, sorry, now it missed that report, that ledger where you can on the
Blockchain.
Sorry, blockchain, on blockchain. So they keep so all votes now can be traced by blockchain. And what happened beforehand? The minor shareholders didn't have there was a lot of frauds, ballots or votes which were not counted, right? So now we can people are being integrated on this type of. Oh, well, of course, I don't want to get on the aspects that you can have a private blockchain inside a blockchain. You know, there's a lot of IT things which again sometimes is not very clear to lay people like me. But you know, there is a lot of things going on. Last but not least, well, yeah, crisis can let happen a lot of pain, but can also give a lot of opportunity. And I'm fully with you that there is an opportunity to fast forward some very necessary changes. And that's what we are seeing, both in local level, regional level, global level. We simply should do the utmost to avoid the explosion of a green bubble, so to say. So unsustainable data, unsustainable algorithms, unsustainable decisions. Yeah, thank you very much for the presentation.
Please comment on that, Ms. Jürschick.
Oh, there's a lot of comments I could have about that.
Yeah.
Where to start? About the supply chain management, it's really interesting to use digital technologies for that. We are now establishing in Europe supply chain laws. Actually, France already has them. The Netherlands, in Germany, it has been and it is a huge fight between lobby groups if there is a supply chain law and what is the content of it. But maybe we will have it this year. And for the next year, actually, supply chain laws are announced also for the European Union. But I think digital solutions doesn't really have a great or doesn't play a real part in it, in the laws. I don't know for the business implementation of the supply chains. But if there would be, maybe that's a good example for the combination of sustainable law and digital technologies. Yeah. For your claim for data, in fact, there's also the concept of data sufficiency, which means that it's not the solution to have data of everything, because for now our IT infrastructure also have a huge environmental impact, and if we store all the data, if we always transport the data, this will always also have a resource impact. So I forgot the numbers. A few years ago, I knew, like, if you watch Netflix for 1 hour, that has an impact of, I don't remember the numbers, unfortunately. But if you Google how much resources your streaming services are taking, for example, And we have like a huge amount of also virtual conferences like this one, where a huge amount of data is transferred to the internet, and it's a lot of potential, but we don't need every data. And as we already could read in the comments, we need to look at the quality of the data. So, but that is also something that you have said. And data sufficiency would be a concept in which you have less data but qualified data. And I don't really know if there are already concepts and solutions how to guarantee the quality of data also. Yeah, maybe I stick with that, and we can invite other people for questions, and then
Exactly.
talk about anything else.
We have the first question, and I believe that's directed to Ms. Jürschick.
Is it
Yes.
like the blue one?
Do you see it in the big screen?
No, I closed the big screen, to see you
Open it.
better.
We just started the questions and answers session, so we can display the questions for everybody to see them. I believe that's for Ms. Jürschick.
Okay, we needed the pandemic.
I can read it out loud. Excuse me. We needed the pandemic to see some impact regarding climate targets. Is public policy simply misconstrued, or are the targets too high?
I think the targets they are on a scientific basis, even if they are not really ambitious, but they reflect in some point the necessity that is to be made to really achieve climate change mitigation. So the targets are not too high because they have to be even higher to really be effective against climate change. What we see is that the priorities of public policy haven't been to the sustainability goals. So the science talked since the 70s about climate change, and since the 90s there has been consensus politically and scientifically that this is really a huge problem that we theoretically need to work on, but there wasn't really the effort of the politics and the economy to work on this problem. There were always other priorities. For example, our Chancellor Angela Merkel, she was claimed the climate chancellor in 2009, and then the financial crisis came and she was occupied with other things. So there were always other crises that overstepped the climate crisis. And what we can see now till 2019, 2018, 2019, that the huge that public decision makers now see how huge this climate crisis will be, and also in the economy, and that everywhere everybody knows now, okay, we have to tackle climate change now, if not we lose against it, or I think it's the people that didn't really get how important this was. I don't know if it's the political system, it's maybe more the people in it. And we could talk about the lobbying thing and how big firms can impact on politics and be a great barrier. But the targets are not too high, no.
No. We see that we need a strong impact for political action to come, right? And it's very cheap to pollute and to destroy the environment, right? Because the consequences will come in 50 years, 100 years maybe. Now the clock is ticking, so to say.
Yeah,
so
and we now see impacts also in Germany, so that really helps. So like heat waves in the summer, and everybody knows, okay, it's about climate change. Like we can feel it here, that there's this crisis coming. And a thing that is really discussed a lot in this transformation sciences and environmental politics since a lot of time is that voting every 4 years. So the politicians, they look for the next 4 years or for a short time period, and how to integrate the long time perspective in politics. That's one of the big questions we need an answer to. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I believe we have a next question for Mr. Vizzotto. Here we go. Do you see the current rise of Bitcoin and blockchain technology in the financial sector as one of the dangers for sustainability in the future?
Thanks, Enika, for the question. And indeed, just like Ulrike was mentioning, the virtualization, the Bitcoin, I would say the Bitcoin narrative is very interesting because it's a very unsustainable activity, because basically what is Bitcoin? It's a virtual currency which is doesn't have underlying asset which guarantees the amount of it. So basically the miners, right? They use computing power in order to discover the result of a given algorithm. And this, and Ulrike, you said you don't remember, but I remember a very interesting data about this harvesting of the data. All these Bitcoin computers, which I think 95% are it's a monopoly. These machines, they are owned by a Chinese company. They are sufficient to light up a whole Argentina. I don't know for how many days or months, but this is how dangerous some new technologies can be. So the digitalization is not the salvation of the economy. We should be really sometime in the surface. It seems that the transaction will be more safe, secure, without intermediation, but at what cost? I have heard an article that blockchain is a solution to a problem which has not been yet developed. A very critical article. But indeed, it can be used for a number of situations, but I really appreciate the concept of data sufficiency as well, which is, and I would like to connect these with the core of my thesis, which is, are we in face of over complexity? Are these regulations maybe too over complex to attain? Maybe we should go back to the basics, right? Of course, we deep dive on these heuristics or cognitive biases that all of us have, which is to think that more complex solutions will solve problems easier. Maybe it's the other way around. We need meaningful data.
Well, I see here a question for each of you, and I will keep in line. Yes, Ms. Jürschick, you may proceed. Okay. How does German law mitigate the consequences of global challenges?
Yeah, the question is if this is supposed to mean in Germany or outside of Germany, because we have in the law we have a territorial principle. So German law is for the German territorium, and there's not very much to do about things for the law, for things that happen outside of Germany. That's like for international cooperation and financial means that are given to other countries for adaptation means. But also in Germany, adaptation is gaining weight in the law. We have adaptation plans, especially for cities. Climate change adaptation to climate change is a really huge challenge, and it is introduced into the planning and construction law to reflect also these needs. In fact, for example, in the health sector, now there is a great movement that concerns what is our health sector, how is our health sector going to adapt to the new challenges climate change will bring to it. For example, the heat waves that cause a much of problems for all older people, and also extreme weather events that, or pandemics or something like that. Our health systems have to be prepared in another way than they are today. But this is a discussion that is just evolving right now, and it's not really far. Yeah. And yeah, I think that's it. What I can say, like, out of the elbow. How do you say it?
Yeah, I don't know, out of the top of my head, maybe spontaneously. I don't know. Anyway, thank you very much. That clarifies. I actually also asked. We spoke about. You spoke about previously about the architecture and how it tries to mitigate some consequences. We have in Germany also on the windows a lot, usually at the university, those birds to avoid bird crashes against the window so they don't die and don't get affected by us. This is kind of also a tool to avoid, to mitigate global challenges, right?
Yeah, this would be more like local challenges actually, but that's also a point. Yeah, a colleague of mine, for example, writes his doctoral thesis about the impact of artificial light on the nature, which is also like a thing that isn't really thought a lot of, but because of big cities that make a lot of light, this is a huge problem for the animals and insects that live in the dark. And yeah, there are a lot of environmental challenges that men pose to the nature. So yeah, there's a lot of movement right now. Yeah.
I thank you very much once again, and we have a second question for Mr. Vizzotto here. I would say after this two questions per speaker, we could finish our session since we're way above our expected time, but it was very exciting. Anyway, I will display this question and then we can proceed to the closing. Well, we have two questions here. One is about the 2030 goals, and the other one is about the characteristics of green commerce and its functionality. Which one do you like? Would you like to answer, Mr. Vizzotto?
Green commerce is an interesting one.
Okay.
Yeah, so you know, there is a green. It's all about an attempt, and thanks still for the question, to standardize or to try to label activities. And what is the role of standardization? The role of standardization is to try to bring to the market certainty. So it's about guidelines, it's about criteria, so far and so on. For example, there has been, and again, these come from multi-layered type of legislation. So again, my onion type of metaphor applies it again. For example, at the World Trade Organization level, you have the technical requirements. So it's the TBT. You also have the SPS requirements, which are technical characteristics of specific goods. But it's not only there. It has also it comes also from the private sector. You have guidelines from the private sector. You have certifications about sustainable trade, right? So all of this, and of course local legislation. I would also talk about the green commerce, as you say, because in some way and I look now to Ms. Ulrich. Sometimes you can have an indirect type of projection, extraterritorial or projection of law, right, from one state to other. It's either being on trying to regulate supply chains, or even using soft law, or for example, what the companies are doing nowadays is when you have a contract is stating that the supplier X will abide to the code of conduct of a specific company. So in terms of having sustainable framework in all supply chain. This cannot be the perfect world, but I think it helps to avoid that any member of a supply chain commit any type of unsustainable activity. Green commerce will also be better described, and again, that is the aspects of the legislation and the regulation: uniformization, standardization, convergence, reduction of asymmetric information, deployment of incentives. So green commerce in Europe will be qualified as goods that are into the European Union taxonomy. And further to this, what are the effects of being part of the so-called green commerce, or of to be part of the green commerce? You should be part of, you should assess how your product qualify in line of the European Union taxonomy. So this is an exercise which is going to be increased on this year and until 2023. So what has started years ago, decades ago, about sustainable commerce, green commerce, is really going to not be more, and I'm very optimistic about it, it will be mainstream sooner or later. And that is the role of what legislation is doing. Yeah, I hope I was clear.
Ms. Jürschick, would you like to comment on that?
As I'm not an expert in green commerce law, yeah, but we need to take the economy on board, and I think especially with the Europe taxonomy, I heard from financial experts that this was a huge step in a direction where environmental and social means really get into the finance sector. And yeah, I think also we are on the way of mainstreaming right now, and let's hope that it gets fast enough for solutions to come.
I'm very happy that your presentations and your knowledge actually intertwined the whole time during the presentation. At least in my mind, I hope it was the same for the spectators. Just now, with your answers, you could combine two things that Ms. Jürschick has said before, which are the benefiting someone that comply with sustainable regulation. You mentioned the extension of liability or limitation periods previously by German law, and how green commerce is actually in Germany also through the Lieferkettengesetz, the supply chain law evolving internationally to overcome the difficulties of creating a sustainable trade environment. And with that said, I would like to thank you all. If you have any further remarks, you are very welcome to do them. The less thought or a resume in 1-2 sentences of your presentation. Otherwise, you have the floor just to give a goodbye to all of our many participants.
Do you want to start? gentlemen.
You can start.
Okay. Yeah, I really enjoyed this discussion. Thank you for the interesting questions and for the interesting discussion partner here. And I think we both come from two very different perspectives, but in the end we all work on the same project. And I think what became very clear is that sustainability transformations is not something that is happening in the eco bubble or in the environmental protection bubble, but it's something that is working if we all get along. And that's also because I guess there are a lot of law students in the audience. It doesn't matter which field of law you're interested in. Just keep in mind that we work together on a sustainability transformation, and sometimes think about, oh, okay, what could be parts of my field of law that could favor this this transformation. Yeah. Thank you.
And what I would like to raise is that I mean, it was a very pleasant interaction. It was really a great event. I think that this is just the beginning of a fruitful interaction that I would like to have with all of you. I'm very happy with the invitation, and very happy to see that even with areas which are not fully connected, we were able to complement each other. And I think that is a whole very important point. I think that very soon we will be sustainability will be mainstream. But just if we had to focus on a point, which I think it's a pain point for the transition, is really be able to capture the lobbies, because the lobbies, the industries, they especially in the case of sustainability regulations on the European level, you may have heard that they wanted to qualify some types of natural gas and nuclear energy as transition type of energy. So this has caused a huge impact in terms of a lot of people on the European Commission wanting to leave the discussions because of the lobby. I think it's always good to find the balance, but yeah, I think that's our role to try to be a translator, to connect the dots. I think connect the dots, it's the message that I would like to leave, with an open heart and always trying to reach sustainability. Thank you.
I believe if you asked me and Annika and our team also what was our wish for this discussion, we would say it's exactly the way it just happened. I congratulate you both for your experience that enable you to make such a good presentation to us and bring such an enrichment to many people I see right now. We've had participants from 8 different countries. So yes, I'm very glad, and I would like to close it right now, and we will keep in touch. And I thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Annika, if you would like to say something as well, you're welcome.
Yeah, I also would just like to thank you. I think it was a great discussion, a great panel, and I am very happy that you are here and yeah, that you were our guest. And I've learned a lot. I hope the spectators also learned a lot, and it was really a celebration of the UN Day of Mother Earth.
Thank you, and bye to everyone in the 8
Thank you. Enjoy your evening. Bye bye. Tschüss.